So just a quick tutorial to help you with some of the things for the Tsunami Lab. So for this lab we are going to use Google Earth, but the good news is we're not going to have to import any files or anything like that. There are two parts to the lab. So the first is the typical lab that you've seen in the previous modules. You'll have a bunch of questions that'll be auto-graded. You can move through this and submit it, and then you can retake this part of the lab and improve your score. And so what you're going to do in this part of the lab is we're going to look at a few things about tsunamis. We talked a little bit about run-up and inundation when we did the homework. But what I'd like you to do at the start of the lab is to locate these 15 spots here. And so what they are how far in the water has come when it hit the coast, right? So it moved in, how many miles or how many kilometers. And so here it is here, and it gives the location. So you can visually see how far it moved in from the coast. And so it seems like a lot, but what you're going to do here is you're just going to highlight this longitude latitude. So I'm going to do this one for you. If you just right click and copy and then go into Google Earth, and you can put it in the search bar and paste it and then just hit search, it'll actually find that location for you. And what you'll want to do is once it centers, then you can just hit this plus here and it'll put an icon right over that location. So you can see in my little places here that I've plotted all the others, and I just named them 1, 2, 3, 4, just like the numbers are on the chart that you saw. And so that would make this one 15. So if I just hit the plus, and of course I have this weird dot, I'm just going to put it back to this. And so I'm just going to label it 15. That's going to be what I'm going to call it. I'm going to click OK, and it's going to give me a location 15. And so once you plot all of those, what I'm going to ask you to do is find the location where the inundation was the lowest or the minimum, so one that was the closest to the coast, and then you can identify the one that was farthest from the coast. So once you plot them all, they'll kind of plot up and down the coast here, and of course visually you should be able to at least pick out the one or two that it might be, and then you might have to measure the two that are the closest to find the one that's the minimum. You might have to measure a couple to find out the maximum, but then you'll choose that answer when it asks you about that. And so the other thing you're going to do is I give you the longitude latitude of the epicenter, so you'll want to plot that. And because we're going to use that to determine how fast the tsunami wave is moving, we also want to use it to predict how long it will take to impact certain locations. And so that's basically what you're going to do in the lab this week is, so here you're going to plot these. Once you plot them, it's going to ask you for the minimum, maximum, and once you choose those values, then actually measure the distance. As always with stuff like this, you want to pick the answer that's the closest because it might not be exact, because where you start and stop might be slightly different. So maybe you get, 2.3 of your choices here, you would choose 2.4 because it's the closest. And that would be the same for most of these answers here, because there's going to be some slight variations in measurements and things like that. So that's just the first part there. And then it's going to ask you to do a couple rate problems, because we know when the earthquake occurred, and in this case when it impacted certain sites, we can figure out how long it took to get there, and then we can use that, because we know the distance, to figure out a rate, right? So distance divided by time would give us how fast the wave was moving. So I want you to calculate those. And then once you have that speed calculated, we could use the speed to predict how long it would take to impact other locations. And so that's what you're going to do in the remaining couple questions here. It's basically look at speeds and times and things like that. Because we can measure distances, remember, in Google Earth here. We're going to use our ruler tool. And if I wanted to know, how far it is from the two, place marks that I have here, make sure you're in kilometers. You can just click once, remember, and click again, and then they would tell you the distance. So you're going to do some measuring there. Use that information with either the speed or the time to calculate some different numbers there, right? So that's basically what you're going to do in the lab. It's not too crazy, but the first part of plotting might take just a little bit, but if you're just copying, pasting, it shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes or so to do that. And then for part 2, remember, there's a second part. What I want you to do is to use your little history here, the history, historical imagery. And what you're going to do is find a location that was impacted by the tsunami wave. And so you'll have to go back in time before the tsunami occurred. So this happened in 2011. You want to find a location before the time frame of the earthquake tsunami, and then you want to find an image of after the tsunami. And so the point of this exercise is to show me some devastation, some impact. So number 1, don't take a screenshot or a picture of something like this far away where you can't really see if there's structures that are damaged, okay? So you want to be close enough where you can see some impact here. You want to make sure that 3D buildings are turned off, because we want to look at live imagery. We don't, or live, an image that shows what's actually there and not what the computer thinks should be there. So make sure you're close enough that you can see some damage. Some students will turn in ones where the green is brown and be like, oh, there's the damage. This is probably just a seasonal effect here. Not looking for that. So if you don't see damage, move to a place where you can see some impact that the tsunami has had on structures. So to get points for the assignment in part 2, you need to be close enough where you can see a change from before and after where structures have been impacted. And you also need to describe the damage that you see there. So you can see what's required of you in the assignment when you turn it in. But the idea is to use the historical imagery to get an image of before the event and after, and show what has occurred there as a result of the tsunami coming on land and destroying some buildings and structures. So that's what the second part is for. So once again, I don't think the lab is going to take you too long here. So you move through the first part, and that's the repeatable part, and then the second part, of course, is to find some locations here. There's plenty of places where there's been some damage, so you just move up and down the coast and look for, as you, number 1, just go back in time to right after the tsunami and just find a place that has been impacted, and then you can just go before that, and that'll be your before picture, and you'll have the damage after picture. Okay, so if you have any trouble with that or any problems, of course, then just feel free to contact me.